Hey friends, it is your creative weird makeup artist Pal Cat Sketch to bring you guys another spooky ooky makeup transformation. Diving into the Halloween season a little bit early, I thought I would turn into none other than the queen of Halloween, in my opinion, Elvira. Also known as Cassandra Peterson, who plays Elvira, the horror show hostess, has been in her own film and television show since 1988. Elvira is currently 71 years old and still a bombshell. She is known for playing a horrific valley girl who's super gothic with glammed out makeup and presenting creepy shows. She's part of the sketch comedy scene also in Hollywood, and she just keeps on slaying and recently came out, and I absolutely love Elvira, so I thought I would turn into Elvira, and not only that, but tell some spooky stories while doing so. So, let's get started. This first creepy tale, and they're all from Reddit, is from someone who is around 10 years old living in San Antonio, Texas. I got back to my family's apartment after school. About 5 minutes from being in that place alone, I saw on the reflection of a mirror an older man in a tuxedo who was in our kitchen. I flipped out and ran into my room and grabbed a bat. I waited 10-ish minutes before coming out. I locked the door, and when I got home, I never heard the door open or someone to leave. I didn't tell anyone about it. Fast forward 6 years later, I was watching Ghost Hunters with my family, and my mom asked if I ever remember seeing an old man in a tuxedo. She must have seen it too. Crazy stuff. This next spooky story is my dad's story and not mine, from the early 1980s. He is working a summer job at Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. One day, he and his friend Mark hiked up to the top of one of the mountains. They set up their tent inside an Indian pit, which is a man-made hole dug out by Native Americans hundreds of years ago. These Indian pits were used either as hunting blinds or spots where young braves came for their vision quest. Late in the night, my dad wakes up and has to use the bathroom. He crawls out the tent, out of the pit, and went walking a respectable distance away from the tent. Suddenly, he felt a hand on his shoulder pull him backwards. My dad calls out, "Hey, Mark, what are you doing?" He turns around, turns on his flashlight, and there is nobody there. He shines the light at his feet and discovers that the next couple of steps would have taken him directly over a steep cliff. He did his business and hurried back to the tent. The next morning, the two friends are waking up, and his buddy says to him, "I know this sounds crazy, but I woke up in the middle of the night, and I swear to you, there was an Indian man standing outside our tent. Whatever really happened that night, my dad is alive, and he met my mom in Yellowstone, and here I am writing you this story today." This next story is from someone that stayed at their grandmother's house that their father had spent a large amount of time in as a kid. My father drove us there in one go and was understandably tired after a 17-hour drive. We all started to lay down, and my father checked in on us before going to bed himself. As he was talking, he stopped himself and told us to cover a large mirror, or you will have nightmares. Now, nightmares from a mirror of all things sounded a little fun to me, but my brothers, who were also sleeping in the same room, asked me to cover it, so I did. I asked my dad about it before he left, and he said ghosts use it as an entryway. A week later, I brought it up to my grandmother, and she scoffed, saying, "Oh, this house ain't haunted," and I agreed. But I told her that the reason that I brought it up was because my dad told me to cover a mirror. My grandmother then changed her expression and said, "Oh, the mirror?" Apparently, the mirror came from her grandmother. She worked as a nurse and took in those who were going to die, but could not pay for the care on their last days. So she made her home into a hospice. Those who stayed in the room with the mirror saw things. A lovely old lady saw and heard a young lady come into her room and played a harp. She was thankful for the lovely songs, but no person was known, nor was there a harp owned anywhere or heard anywhere else in the home. One young boy found an older boy who played games with him. and really knew his games. Lastly, a terrible woman refused to use the bathroom, and she shat in a cooking pot and hid it under her bed. And she argued about this issue daily. And she would say these words that the devil had spat fire at her. The police were called and she tried to accuse the nurse of trying to kill her with the devil. I also got stories from my mother seeing the same young lady who played the harp, but without her harp that time. And my grandmother sees the devil guy. My grandfather describes it as the red man with horns that was too tall for the room, and he was standing up straight, bent his neck down to fit in. He stared down at him and simply asked slowly, "Why are you here?" And so I kept that mirror covered. This next story is from a person who is around 12 to 17 years old. And they weren't sure when they lived in what they believed was a haunted house. I've never had experiences like I had in that house since moving out. A few specific memories come to mind. Once I was hanging up laundry in my closet and I heard someone whisper my name in my ear, clear as day. I never sprinted out of the room so fast. Another time my sister and I had friends over and we decided to use a tape recorder to ask questions to the ghosts like they do on the paranormal shows. So we played the tape not expecting to hear anything, and we could hear a soft voice say, "I'm in the closet." We were sitting near a small closet in our basement. My parents eventually decided to sell the house. We moved into a new place before selling the place. My sister stopped by the house after there had been a couple of showings to turn out the lights in the house. She went to turn off the lights in the basement, which had multiple light switches. One of the light switches was at the far end of the basement away from the stairs. So she turned off the lights and swears she heard heavy footfalls of someone running towards her. She ran out of the house without turning on the rest of the lights and locked the door. That was the last time either of us went back there until we were in the neighborhood, and the new owners offered to show us the renovations they made. Nothing happened then, but they did ask us if we wanted to babysit their kids. We politely declined. This is my mom's story, but she is completely sane and I believe it. My parents went to South Carolina for a wedding. They stayed at some old plantation bed and breakfast spot. She was sleeping when she woke up all of a sudden. She had her cell phone plugged into the wall charging, and it was on her nightstand. There was a notification on the phone, so it was blinking. There was a female ghost, was dressed in a full, old formal dress and was fixated on the cell phone blinking light and was walking towards it. My mom simply said, "It's okay, it's just a phone." The ghost turned and made eye contact with my mom and then disappeared. This next person used to sell HVAC in Michigan during college. There was this really awesome old dude that called for new, high-efficiency furnaces in his historic home in town near Ann Arbor. As I'm putting together the quote, he gets talking about the home and its history. He tells me that was part of the Underground Railroad and had a tunnel that led down to the train station that was about 500 yards away. I'll be honest, I was more focused on the sale than all the details he was laying out about the house. But one thing that made my ears perk up was the people that lived with him. He tells me about a few, but the one that stuck out was he said that there was a lady that was so fascinated with electricity that she would turn random lights on at random times in the home. As I'm printing out the quote and going over the details and payment options with him, the light behind me turns on. Then the one across the room, then the one in the kitchen, and then the one in the hallway. I just kind of got quiet and sunk a little in my seat. Then the old dude raised his voice and said something like, "Okay, that's enough for today, sweetheart. We can do it again tomorrow." To this day, I don't know if the old dude was just having some fun with me or if it was real. I eventually closed the sale, and the installation team said there wasn't anything too wonky or out of the norm with this electricity, but maybe there was a light-loving specter. So the next person was camping with two friends. They were camping in a small tent, staggered with two of our heads on one side and one on the other. It was a silent and still night with fog developing in the moist Pacific Northwest woods. What sounds like a muffled voice in a cell phone starts coming out from the center of our tent between our heads. I heard someone keep asking, "Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?" My friends asked, "Are you hearing that?" At once we all sit up and start shuffling around the tent, looking for a phone, but there's no phone in our tent. I look at my friend on the other side of the tent and ask what they heard. It sounded like someone said, "Hello, can you hear me?" We all agreed that's what we heard. And that sound was coming from the other side of our tent. The next morning we find all of our cell phones sitting in the car still. And there's no cell phone reception at the campground we're staying at. And this still sends shivers up my spine. This next story has stuck with this person since they were a kid. I grew up in a house that had this creepy Indian bust of a head and shoulders, and it looked like a stereotypical as you can imagine, but something was sinister about it. So for many years, my bedroom was just outside by this, and I swear that it watched me all the time. It wasn't a trick of the eye or the light. It wasn't my imagination. It was real. One night I saw the figure looking at me. I was coming in from the movies and my parents were asleep. I saw this thing staring at me, its cold bronze looking not so much like me, but right into my very soul. And the figure blinked. Its mouth moved. I froze and I couldn't move and I couldn't scream. All I could do was stare back at the hideous statue looking at me till my body allowed me to move. I've never felt so much malice and evil intent radiate off of anything in my entire life. Some years later, my parents died and my house was sold off, and I never found out what happened to that bust. But I rest a little easier knowing that it was hopefully destroyed and rotting in some landfill. This next story happened to the person when they were 9 years old in 2010. My friend in the neighborhood found a Ouija board in his brother's stuff while he was away at college. He told me what it was and asked me if I wanted to play it with him. Trying to impress him, I said yes, and we went into his room and we tried it. Nothing happened, and we were left disappointed. Later that week, he called me and told me that he looked up how to use the board properly and wanted to give it another go. I agreed as I was more confident that nothing would happen. So we grabbed a bunch of scented candles and we placed them around the board and did the whole seance stuff. We asked the board if anyone was there, and it was, of course, went to yes. We thought the other was messing around, but we agreed to take it seriously because I didn't really care if it was a stupid joke. We asked the ghost what its name was, and it spelled out Owen. My friend asked if it was a person, and it went to no. We asked what it was, and it spelled out demon. I then asked to prove it. But then we heard a noise coming from the garage. Keep in mind, it was only us in the house. It scared the crap out of us and we ran out of the house and we checked the garage but nothing was there. Anyway, a few weeks go by and he tells me now he's having paranormal experiences. He feels like he is being watched whenever he is downstairs in the kitchen and living room. He feels like someone's sitting on the end of his bed every single night. Every time he walks past the garage, he feels someone grab his wrist and pull it towards the garage. Whenever I went over, I always got the feeling that someone was looking at me from the ceiling. It was definitely unnatural. Then came the scariest part of all. We were all at his house playing Army in his room while no one else was home when we began to hear heavy footsteps downstairs, except whatever was making it had hooves. It sounded like a full-grown horse and was walking around downstairs. Then we heard someone begin to laugh and cough at the same time. My friend ran over and slammed the door shut, and we hid. He hid under his bed for a while, and I hid in his closet. Then it sounded like someone began scratching at his door with one big claw, like the ones raptors had with their one big toe. He started crying, and I was on the verge of tears. My friend yelled, "Leave us alone, Owen, you're scaring us." It began to stop, and then we heard it run down the stairs. My friend got up and then threw me out of the closet and grabbed the Ouija board. He ran down the stairs, ripped the screen door off the gas fireplace, threw the thing in there, and then put the screen back on and went to turn it on. When he was about to turn it on, we heard a loud moan from the basement, which was right behind my friend. He flicked the fireplace on and the board began to burn. That was the end of that, and we played outside since he was too scared to go back into the house until his parents got home. His parents came home and saw that he burned his brother's Ouija board. They grounded him and threw the burnt board away. That was the end of the paranormal experiences in my friend's house, and that's why I will never take part in one of those games ever again. This next story happened to this person when they were around 9 or 11 years old. My family lived in a 3-bedroom duplex. I had my own room from across from my mother's room down a short hallway. My brother's room was on the opposite side of the house. For the full 3 to 4 years that we lived there, we couldn't sleep facing my wall. Anytime I fell asleep or attempted to while facing the wall, I would feel someone smack me on the back of my head with their hand. At first, I thought this was my older brother being an ass until it happened while I heard a loud squeaky door shut. It also happened for the 6+ months he was in juvie. My mother does not move quickly or quietly, and it even happened while I had a friend stay the night, but only to me and only when I tried sleeping facing the wall. One night my door was left open and I went to bed. I was fast asleep on my back when I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and I had a feeling that someone was standing above me. I looked up to see a long, soft blue light suspended 6 to 12 inches above the floor in the center of the straight hallway between my mom's room and mine. I was kind of woozing upside down, so after a minute of staring into the soft blue light, I turned over. After a few seconds, I noticed there was a slim, middle-aged man floating there, covered in blue light. And he's making eye contact with me, and his face is expressionless. He's just staring down at me, and I'd never seen him before, but it didn't scare me for some reason. About 10 uninterrupted minutes of just staring at each other. Somehow, while looking at him, I fall back asleep. I never saw that man again. However, until the day I moved out, I could not sleep facing the wall, or I would be woken with a quick smack to the back of the head in the middle of the night. And no one believes me, of course. So that concludes our spooky tales. I hope you enjoyed me turning into Elvira today. This was so much fun. Leave me a comment of what other video ideas you would love to see for spooky season. I'm preparing early. I'm so excited for Halloween. I hope you are too. And I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Bye!